It was close to midnight when thick fog covered the small town of Black Hollow. For the past 3 months, people had been disappearing without a trace, only to be found dead in different places across the town. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, and no useful security footage. The only thing every crime scene shared was a strange, white symbol drawn in chalk on a nearby wall. Nobody knew what it meant, and the police had reached a dead end. Ethan Graves, a 27-year-old freelance photojournalist, loved exploring abandoned places and investigating mysterious stories. Although he was not a detective, he believed every mystery left behind at least one clue. One morning, while drinking coffee, he saw breaking news about another victim found inside an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Feeling that something was different this time, he grabbed his camera and drove there. The police had already sealed off the area, but from a distance he managed to photograph the strange white symbol. Later that night, while zooming in on the picture, he noticed tiny numbers hidden inside the symbol, almost invisible to the naked eye. Curious, he searched old newspapers and crime scene photos, comparing every symbol from previous murders. Each one contained different numbers, and when he arranged them in order, they became coordinates leading to one location outside Black Hollow. The next night, he drove there alone. The road ended at an abandoned factory that had been closed for more than 30 years. Rusted machines, broken windows, and the sound of metal doors moving in the wind filled the place with an eerie silence. Using a flashlight, Ethan explored the building until he found a half-open iron door leading to a hidden room. Inside were dusty files, torn photographs, old city maps, and a list of every murder victim reported in the news. At the bottom of the list was another name that had never been announced. A cold chill ran through his body. If the list was real, another person was going to die before anyone knew they were in danger. He tried calling the police, but there was no signal. He rushed back to his car, and while leaving, he noticed a black sedan parked beside the road with all 4 doors open. Yet nobody was anywhere nearby. The next morning, the news confirmed his worst fear. Another victim had been found, and the name matched the one on the list exactly. Ethan realized the killer was leaving the symbols on purpose, not as random marks, but as messages, or perhaps a challenge, for anyone clever enough to understand them. Determined to uncover the truth, he investigated the victims' pasts and discovered they had all attended the same conference 7 years earlier, but every online record of that event had mysteriously disappeared. The deeper he dug, the stronger the feeling became that someone was watching him. One evening he returned home and found his apartment door slightly open. Everything inside was untouched, except for one thing. His camera, which he had accidentally left in the abandoned factory, was sitting neatly on the table beside a black envelope. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a recent photograph of himself standing outside his apartment. The previous night, written on the back in elegant handwriting, were the words, "You're closer than anyone has ever been." Ethan looked toward the window, convinced someone was watching from the building across the street. He ran outside, searching every corner, but the streets were completely empty. High above, on the rooftop of a nearby building, a mysterious figure wearing a long black coat and a simple mask silently watched the town before turning away and disappearing into the fog. The screen slowly faded to black as the words appeared. A full week had passed since Ethan found the photograph inside his apartment, but he hadn't told anyone about it. Deep down, he knew the person following him wasn't trying to kill him. At least not yet. Whoever was behind all of this wanted him to keep searching, to get closer to the truth, one step at a time. Since that night, Ethan barely slept more than 2 hours a day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same white symbol And every morning he woke up to another report of someone disappearing. The streets became empty after sunset, stores closed early, and the police quietly warned people to stay indoors at night. Still, the murders continued, becoming stranger with every new victim. One afternoon, Ethan received an envelope with no return address. Inside was an old map of the town with a red circle around an abandoned psychiatric hospital. At the bottom, someone had written, "Everything started here." Without wasting a second, he drove straight there. The massive building stood in complete silence, its shattered windows and cracked walls making it look forgotten by time. Every step echoed through the dark hallways, as if the building itself was listening. Patient files were scattered across the floor, most of them torn beyond recognition. Only one file remained untouched. Almost every personal detail had been blacked out, but one thing caught Ethan's attention. The patient had been admitted exactly 7 years earlier, the same year every murder victim attended the mysterious conference. He quickly opened the file. Inside was only a single page with one chilling sentence: "The experiment failed." Suddenly, a heavy door slammed shut somewhere behind him. Ethan spun around, but nobody was there. The old lights began flickering, and slow footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. He raised his flashlight, but the corridor was empty. Carefully, he followed the sound until he reached an abandoned operating room. The room looked empty, except for an old film projector sitting in the corner beside a dusty reel. He turned it on. Grainy black and white footage filled the screen. Several men in formal suits stood beside a doctor who appeared to be presenting a secret project. The recording was badly damaged. The sound kept cutting in and out, but one sentence came through clearly: "If anyone survives, he will remember everything." Then the film suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, the projector switched on by itself. This time it wasn't showing the old recording. It was showing Ethan walking through the hospital only minutes earlier, filmed from an angle where no camera and no person had been standing. His blood ran cold. Who had recorded him? Who had been watching him the entire time? He rushed toward the exit, but every door was locked. The hallways no longer looked the same. Every door he opened led him back to the same corridor, as if the hospital had become an endless maze. Then, at the far end of the hallway, he saw a man standing perfectly still. The man wore the same long black coat as the mysterious figure from before, but this time he wasn't wearing a mask. Just as Ethan was about to see his face, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. When the lights came back a few seconds later, the man was gone. Only the white symbol remained on the wall, and beneath it someone had written, "You remember more than you think." As dawn finally broke, Ethan managed to escape the hospital. He thought the nightmare was over, but when he arrived home, his apartment door was already open. He stepped inside carefully. Nothing had been stolen. Everything looked exactly as he had left it, except for one thing. Hanging on the wall opposite the entrance was a large old photograph, taken 7 years earlier. Every murder victim stood together in the picture, smiling at the camera. Ethan's heart nearly stopped when he noticed the man standing in the back row. It was him. He stared at the photograph in disbelief, because he had absolutely no memory of ever attending that conference. His hands trembled as he looked closer. In the bottom corner, written by hand, was one final message: "You were never the investigator. You were there from the beginning." Ethan stood frozen in front of the old photograph, unable to take his eyes off his own face among the people in the picture. He tried to remember something, anything, a moment, a voice, a single memory, but his mind was completely blank. For the first time since the investigation began, He stopped asking who the killer was. Instead, he asked himself one question: who was I 7 years ago? The next morning, he took the photograph to the city's archive. After hours of searching through old records, he finally found a file about the conference that had mysteriously disappeared from every online database. Most of the pages had been deliberately torn out. Only the last page remained. At the bottom was a list of everyone who had attended the conference. Ethan Graves was on that list. His heart sank as the truth began to sink in. As he left the archive, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained nothing except an address, an old warehouse on the edge of Black Hollow, and one short sentence: if you want the truth, come alone. That night, Ethan drove to the warehouse. The building was silent and completely dark. He stepped inside carefully and switched on his flashlight. In the middle of the room stood a large projector screen. Without warning, it flickered to life. A man was sitting in a chair, his face hidden in the shadows. In a calm voice, he said, "I've been looking for you for 7 years." Ethan stared at the screen and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled. "I'm the last person who survived that night." Old video recordings began to play. They showed the conference from 7 years earlier. It wasn't an ordinary event. It was a secret meeting involving powerful people hiding a massive corruption network responsible for covering up crimes and blackmailing dozens of victims. Journalists, businessmen, and government officials were all part of it. Ethan had attended the conference as an undercover photojournalist, secretly gathering evidence to expose everyone involved. Before he could leave, the organizers discovered who he really was. They attacked him, leaving him with a serious head injury. He barely survived, but the trauma erased a large part of his memory. The evidence he had collected disappeared without a trace. The screen suddenly went black, and silence filled the warehouse. Then the man stepped out of the darkness. He was wearing the same long black coat seen throughout the investigation, but this time his face was uncovered. He wasn't a monster or some mysterious legend. He was simply a man in his 40s whose face carried the weight of years spent chasing the truth. He looked at Ethan and quietly said, "I didn't start this game. I'm here to finish it." He explained that he had once been an investigator on the same case. After powerful people forced the investigation to be shut down, he continued hunting everyone involved on his own. The strange symbols had never been random. They were clues meant to lead only one person back to the truth. Ethan, looking him straight in the eyes, the man said, "I never wanted you to find me. I wanted you to remember." At that moment, the sound of approaching police sirens echoed outside the warehouse. Before the officers could enter, the lights suddenly went out. A few seconds later, they came back on. The man was gone. In the middle of the room, only a small metal box remained. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were several memory cards and an old camera, the same camera he had used 7 years earlier. When he checked the files, he found complete recordings exposing everything that had happened at the conference, revealing everyone involved in the conspiracy. A few days later, the evidence became public. The case was officially reopened, and several powerful figures who had avoided suspicion for years were finally arrested. Little by little, peace returned to Black Hollow, but Ethan couldn't shake one final question. Who had sent the anonymous messages? Who had placed the photographs inside his apartment? And who had been secretly watching him all along? A month later, as he prepared to leave the town behind, he found a white envelope resting on the driver's seat of his car. There was no name on it. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a fresh photograph taken that very morning, showing him standing outside his house. On the back Only one sentence was written: "Some truths should never be found." Ethan quickly looked around. The streets were busy. People walked by without noticing him, and nobody seemed to be watching. He folded the photograph, slipped it into his pocket, started the engine, and quietly drove away from Black Hollow. As his car disappeared into the distance, the camera slowly pulled back to reveal a lone figure, standing on the rooftop of a distant building, silently watching the road. His face remained hidden. Only a faint smile could be seen before the screen faded to black.